Another one. My nephew was born with diabetes, or he had a child type 2 diabetes, I think it's called, right? Again, in the 1930s, all those kids would probably die before the age of 10 or 7 or 8 or something like that. Right now, he's a young lad, probably 23 years old. He's at the university football team. He's like 6'3", and he's the embodiment of health and strength. Right?
Great.
Another case in which I believe the discovery of insulin, which was, by the way, done here at the University of Toronto, saved a life and many millions of lives, and gives those people a chance of life that they never had. And I mean, that's why they gave the fastest ever Nobel Prize for medicine for the invention of insulin, because immediately, as soon as it was invented, it started producing immediate results of saving people's lives. Also, cancer. If we talk about cancer, I think there's many forms of cancer nowadays. I mean, my mother died from cancer when she was 38 and a half, unfortunately. But so that didn't work for her, even though she did go through like even radiation therapy and chemotherapy, and nothing helped in her case. But the reason for this was, again, because her treatment was done in Bulgaria. As I found out later on, if she had the chance to go to, say, France or Switzerland and be treated for the same type of cancer that she had, the type of treatment that she had on her was not being in usage in those countries since the 1940s. So, of course, Bulgaria was about 40 or 50 years behind in terms of medical science. And most people with that kind of cancer survive nowadays, right? So aren't those all clear cases in which science has made a difference and measurable effect on the life expectancy of people?
Nick, I hope you realize I'm not denying that there's progress. We've already talked about things like vaccines and antibiotics and so forth. When my first child was born, my son McNeil, who's now a big strapping 17-year-old boy, his mother could not deliver him vaginally, and so she had to have a cesarean section. They both probably would have died 150 years ago.
Yeah.
Or at least one of, my wife probably would have died. I mean, I've seen the impact of medicine. Medicine has made tremendous strides in many areas, obviously. I'm addressing this theoretical limit that we're talking about. Yeah, the ceiling. And it seems to me that's why it's important to bring up cancer and genetic therapy, because we're talking about senescence. We're talking about some of these diseases of aging that become almost universal when you reach a certain point and a certain age. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some really dramatic breakthrough there. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's my 17-year-old son. I've got to. Can I?
Yeah.
Can I actually?
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Hey, Mac. Yeah. Hey, listen. I'm on an internet interview. Okay. I was just talking about you, actually. But I have to get off. Okay. Pardon me? Yeah. You can take the car if you want for a little bit. Okay. All right. Bye. Okay.
All right.
See there. Speak of the devil.
He's got the car now, so he's free to go.
Right.
Good.
So I think you see what I'm saying. I'm looking for, and the thing
so the debate is for the ceiling. Is there a natural ceiling or not?
I think it looks at this point.
You believe there is?
I think it's obvious that there is, and I think the vast majority of real experts in senescence, not people like Aubrey de Grey, who's I think a computer scientist who suddenly became obsessed with his own mortality. I don't count him as a genuine expert. The genuine experts see this ceiling and they think it has to do with these genetic processes, some of which can be explained even by evolutionary theory. But natural selection just didn't design us to live that long beyond our reproductive years, and so our bodies start breaking down in all sorts of ways. Now, I don't think there's anything mystical about this. I don't rule out the possibility that there could be some kind of genetic intervention, maybe even a pharmaceutical intervention that has a dramatic impact on longevity and slows down senescence and those sorts of things. But I don't see anything happening right now that leads me to believe that it's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, you said that you don't believe that Aubrey de Grey is the expert, but let me see what you think about his argument about replacing the parts, or his so-called old car argument or old plane argument. And the argument goes like this. You know, you can have a car which was built to last 10 or 20 years, say a Ford Model T or something like that, right? And provided that you have good maintenance and you replace all the parts that break, you can drive that car forever. Because we now know how a car runs, we know all the parts, we know how to fix them, and we know how to replace them. So why would that not hold true for us as humans? I mean, just yesterday I was reading an argument about the first Italian boy, I think he was 15 years old, who has an artificial heart implant. And in his particular case, he had a very specific muscular degeneration on one of the valves, I think. That's going to be a permanent implant. So it's not going to be taken out ever, right?
Right.
So if we're able to replace a kidney or a liver or, implant an artificial heart in somebody at the age of 15 when their heart is not working properly, why wouldn't be able to do so at 130 if, say, arguably 130 is the ceiling that you've mentioned? Why, and if, say, you have a 130-year-old woman in France whose heart goes out, why wouldn't be in theory able to provide her with an artificial heart and therefore resolve her heart issue and therefore provide her with extra 10 or 15 or 20 years of life?
Well, listen, I love thought experiments, but they don't really. Ultimately, they don't impress me as arguments that help us figure out what's going to happen in the near future. So when I hear this sort of thought experiment, my reaction would be, why aren't billionaires doing this right now? You know, if you can really, if Aubrey de Grey's replacement theory of to forestall aging is correct, I would think. And maybe, I bet there are billionaires already out there trying to do this sort of thing. That they're getting spare parts from people. They're buying organs.
And they are. We do have medical tourists and stuff. People go to places like India and China even and so on to get organ replacements. Okay,
now a couple of things. First of all, as far as I know, I haven't heard any stories about how that has lifted the medical ceiling. Maybe it's just too early yet. But then there's also the obvious problem of brain transplants.
Yeah.
I don't think that's in the cards yet. And by the time you're 100, even the old Madame Clement, apparently she was a pretty lively old lady. Most people, by the time they get to 100 years old, their brains aren't working that well. A lot of them have Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's, which are also diseases of aging. So, my attitude is I don't rule it out, but show me, do it. Instead of just creating these sort of, well, imagine if this happens and that happens. That doesn't really ultimately impress me that much. I want to see signs that it's happening right now or that the first steps are being taken, and I really don't see that happening. Conventional heart and liver transplants and those sorts of things, I don't see any signs that those are lifting the ceiling.
But aren't those things conventional today by our modern day contemporary measure? I mean, by 20 years or 30 years ago, they were not contemporary. They were not conventional at all. And so in another 30 years, what is not conventional now would be conventional in 3 decades from now.
Well,
isn't that the whole point of progress of science, or do you not accept that? I mean, and also with the vision point, like I have a very healthy skepticism, scientific skepticism in me, I believe. And actually, we recently argued with a friend of mine about the difference between religion and science. And my argument was that in religion, it all starts with faith. In science, it starts with doubt, I think, or with a healthy skepticism. But you also need to have the vision. I mean, if you were in the 1950s and you tell somebody, show me how we get to the moon, or if you were in 1900 and you tell the Wright brothers, show me how you fly, well, 2 years down the road, they would have shown you, but not at 1900, you know? So
where's my vision? Okay, I'll tell you what my vision is now. I've gone from being a psychedelic singularity believer to being a pacifist who actually thinks that it's possible that war and militarism around the world will end. So that's something I've been writing a lot about lately. I think that makes me as optimistic as anybody, more optimistic than most people, because I've actually been surveying people for a few years now, and the vast majority of people I survey, about 90%, say that war is a permanent part of the human condition. Mm-hmm. That it's naive, sentimental, romantic to talk about a world without war. But that's something that I fervently believe in, and part of and what I've.
So what do you say when somebody tells you the same as you say? Show me the peace. I mean, any point in the world. I mean, interestingly enough, before I got into the Singularity, my area was armed conflict. That's what I did my MA on, and that's how I got into the Singularity, right? So my whole undergrad and graduate degree was in armed conflict and war theory, ethics in war, just war theory, etc. And actually, the way I got involved in the Singularity was by writing a research paper on artificial intelligence at the time of war, which I ended up calling Hacking Destiny: Critical Security at the Intersection of Machine and Human Intelligence. And I was looking at the conflicts of Iraq and Afghanistan in the context of the first time when increasingly automated machines start taking increasingly automated decisions about whether humans would live or die.